Right, hi everyone. I do have some slides, but I'm actually not going to use them because I think I can maybe explain it better without slides, what I wanted to say today. And I do feel slightly fish out of water here because I'm not an expert on roads or traffic for that matter. But sometimes there's an advantage to that because my responsibility covers the whole transport portfolio. So one of the things that I can do is sort of compare and contrast across rail and roads, for example. So the basic thing I wanted to talk to you about today is that my view, and the mayor's view, is that roads have been underinvested in relative to other transport modes over a very long period of time, and we think that that needs to change. If you look at the rail network in London over the last 10 years, we've seen investment in Crossrail going in, we've seen the tube upgrades, and so you're talking about tens of billions of pounds over a period of several decades, sure, going into the rail network in London. And the purpose of that is not maintenance or even sort of, very good maintenance and enhancements. It's about a significant change in the quality of the rail network, the capacity of the rail network, the reliability. You're talking about 20 to 30% increases in capacity, 20 to 30% increases in reliability. In the case of Crossrail, 200,000 extra seats in the peak. And then if you think back to the road network, where's that level of ambition for the road network? And somehow these two things are seen as distinct, that there's a fantastic economic case for building capacity on the rail network, for commuting, to preserve the economic heart of London. But roads, the same doesn't apply. Why is that true? So it's about the volume of spend. I mean, if you look at the subsurface upgrade, which is the district, circle, et cetera, that's a £5 billion program, and there isn't a comparable program on the road network. But it's firstly about the volume of spend, but it's also about the kind of language and aspiration level. So I guess, in summary, we need to kind of lift our aspirations for the road network, and that was something that the mayor talked about during the election campaign. And there's a number of reasons why you might want to do this, a number of things that support that argument. First of all, if you look in London, 80% of trips that are made every day, roughly, are happening on the road network. And that doesn't mean just vehicular traffic, obviously. It's pedestrians, cyclists, freight, buses, taxis, et cetera. So just in sheer volume terms, in terms of the movement in the capital, if you were just to take that, you would think that 80% of our capital program would be invested in the road network. I mean, obviously, that's totally facile, but what we actually see is the complete reverse of that, and that doesn't feel like the right balance either. Secondly, one of the things that's supporting it is the recent political pressures that we've had in London, particularly around road safety and around cycling. There's been a lot of lobbying, very effective lobbying from the cycling sort of community, from the Assembly. Our road safety stats are still sort of broadly going in the right direction, but they're certainly flatter than they were, say, 5-6 years ago in terms of the trajectory. And all of that requires certainly a whole range of soft measures, but we can't say that this has nothing to do with the physical infrastructure of the road network, of the signaling systems, things like curb lines and designs of the road network, quality of maintenance, all affect that agenda as well. So that's been quite helpful in terms of raising the profile of the road network and, do we have the road network that we want in London? The third thing is the sort of world city issue. How is London going to compete with other cities around the world? We're not going to be Hong Kong. We feel we need to compete with Hong Kong. We want to be in the top 10. Obviously, we want to be number one, right? But we want to be in the top 10, and we're not going to be able to compete with a Hong Kong or a New York on their terms. So what is going to make London distinctive, and how can the road network support that? And it isn't by just having a sort of hodgepodge of measures that's hopefully going to get us to the right answer. So that's about traffic flow, but it's also about quality of life, pollution, all those kinds of issues. Fourthly, there's been, as you know way better than I do, significant advances in traffic engineering over the last 30, 40 years. So if you look at junctions designed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, apart from the sort of underlying ideology behind some of those junctions, there's just the way you do that today simply isn't the same as the way you did it all those decades ago. But again, there hasn't been that investment in upgrading those junctions to the sort of modern, cutting-edge standards. And there's a few examples around London where we have done that, where we've sought to do that, like at Henley's Corner. But there's many, many examples of junctions where we should be doing that, but there isn't a program of work to do that. And the last thing is, and this is sort of slightly beyond transport, but the last thing that's pushing us towards investing in the road network is the growth in London is sort of in this kind of bagel around central London. So you've got central, inner, outer, and the a lot of the growth in terms of jobs and housing in London is projected to be in that sort of inner London area. So what you need is a road network that can support that. Sure, we're trying to get as many trips as possible to be carried on public transport, but there is a volume of journeys that is going to happen on the road network, and East London is a great example where, whilst we're projecting growth in congestion in London of about 14%, the biggest chunk of that by far is driven by the growth in East London. And, again, does the road network have the ability to support that as currently designed? So we need to be able to support that growth, so it's not transport, it's transport as enabler of jobs and growth. And when you think about it in those terms, there's a number of places where you would invest, and specifically invest in the road network, that you wouldn't necessarily invest in if you were thinking about it purely with a transport hat on. But there's obviously challenges associated with doing all of this stuff. It's easy to talk about, but first of all, lack of historical budgets. Certainly within Transport for London, we've now got this big capital program over at the Underground, and we've got this small capital program over at on the surface side of the business. So how do you rebalance that? We don't do zero-based budgeting. So we're trying to sort of over time looking to make the case and rebalance that. Secondly, it's almost a cultural issue about, I was talking to Donna Skelly, who I'm sure many of you know, about, how you raise people's sights. So, the traffic engineers and the roads maintenance guys are always kind of, well, we're never going to get any money for this, so how can we do this on a shoestring, rather than putting forward a case for something where you actually think that you might actually get the right answer funded as opposed to the affordable answer funded, and sort of over time seeking to change that. That's more of a kind of internal culture issue. A big challenge also is the sort of political allergy about roads. Everybody in London is conscious of what's happened in the past, where when you talk about roads, everyone thinks you're a pro-motorist, which can be okay in certain parts of London electorally, but in other parts of London it isn't. And secondly, they think that you're going to knock down a lot of houses and build whacking great motorway through the center of London. So explaining this correctly and in the right order is a challenge. But I think that we can do it. And also the political sort of moment, I think, is ripe, certainly in London, for trying to shift where we are. And there's a lot of softness around the agenda in certain fronts. For example, because of some of the political pressure around cycle safety, allows you to talk about investment in the road network in a way that we weren't able to in the past. And then obviously the last challenge is that there's such a wide range of users on the road network that invariably, when you set out on this kind of an adventure, you know that, at least 50% of people are going to be unhappy with where you end up. But that, not everyone will be happy, and you just need to accept that at the outset. So just a few things about what we're actually doing on this. The mayor set up something called the Roads Task Force, with a mix of representatives from across a whole range of different groups, including Freight, the AA, the RAC Foundation, also developers, people who are representing the kind of non-movement functions of the road network. And that's looking to report in April with a sort of strategic view about where London's road network should be going to. And in parallel, we're looking at our investment program. There's a number of commitments that the mayor made during the election about investing in black spots around London, sort of traffic black spots. We've got a big junction review going on about cycle safety as well. And so these are trying to shift us more over time, get us into a kind of step change in terms of, again, both the volume of funding that we're putting in, but also our aspirations for the road network, which if you look at other countries and other cities, they really have invested in the road network in the same way we think about the rail network. So hopefully over time you'll start to see some of those things changing, and obviously it's not going to happen overnight or even in a year's time, but it's sort of over 3, 5, 10 years. We're hoping that we can really put a significant increase in terms of investment, and also the people out on the network will see a real step change in terms of their experience of the road network. So I think I'll probably just leave it there and then look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.